Earlier this year, a rescue organization by the name of Woofy Acres abandoned about 30 dogs at a boarding facility due to non-payment. Now, word has come that on or around July 18th, reportedly the same organization had around 120 dogs confiscated by Devore Shelter. Kennel Eviction Rescue, who saved the 30 dogs that were initially abandoned, pointed out that the address that the dogs were confiscated from matches the address Woofy Acres is registered to. Over a month later, many people in the rescue community have noticed that only around 17 of these dogs have been listed on Devore's website as available for a rescue to pull. Many are speculating that the rest have been euthanized, which isn't a huge leap because Devore is a very high kill shelter, and it is likely that the dogs would be aggressive based on the conditions they came from and the fact that most of them have been in a shelter environment or worse since 2021 or 2022. Because of my firsthand experience with Woofy Acres and knowing about 10 dogs that they once boarded at a facility where I volunteered, I called Devore to find out if any of the dogs that I knew were there so that I could try and get them back to what was probably the most stable and relaxing environment that they had known in the last 3 years. But Devore said that they couldn't disclose because it's an ongoing investigation. I asked if some of the dogs confiscated had been euthanized, and they said yes. Woofy Acres' first red flag was that they pulled dogs like crazy, but they never posted them again after pulling them, not on social media and not on their website. You can't find a dog a home if nobody knows it exists. I think that it's really important to look at this egregious, horrible, appalling case and, of course, hold Woofy Acres accountable for what they did, but I think it's extremely important to look at this much bigger thing and take accountability for each and every subsect that has contributed to this enormous problem that has put us in a position where this can happen. Many people want to ask, why would Orange County and LA County and San Bernardino County continue giving dogs to this person when it's very clear that this person never posted these dogs after their initial pull, and supposedly continued giving this person dogs after it came out that she had abandoned the 30 dogs in San Gabriel Valley. I think the answer is probably the same as why this person kept trying to pull dogs when they had no means of taking care of them. And what it comes down to is, at the end of the day, if they hadn't let Diane from Woofy Acres walk away with this dog, that dog was going to die that day. Diane was pulling useless dogs, dogs that were going to be euthanized that day. What needs to be understood in order for this to never happen again is that the dogs in LA County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, when they're posted as youthless dogs, which is not uncommon, those dogs are going to die. They're going to be put down that day. And so while I can understand asking, why would you keep giving this woman these dogs when you don't know what's happening to them? People can justify in their minds, including perhaps Diane from Woofy Acres, this dog would be dead if it were not for Diane taking that dog that very same day. But I also think that we need to take accountability for the fact that it's millions of people who are allowing this horrible situation to happen that necessitates organizations that aren't legit coming and saving these dogs out of necessity. So, this just happened with the case of April Addison. She just did the exact same thing, but hopefully much more deplorable. I pray that when we find out more about this case, it's not going to be a case like that. Can't even think about the dogs that I knew being in that situation. But the point is, it's becoming more common that these rescues come up and they try to save the day or just make a buck. Who can say what their real motivation is? But we have to take accountability for the fact that the only reason this is able to happen is because of the state of things where we live. And so I think if you look at the about 10 million people who live in LA County, these horrible monsters who are rescuing these dogs and then neglecting them or abusing them are 2 out of this 10 million. Maybe more than that, but the point is, look at this bigger subsect and ask yourself, how is this entire county in this position to begin with to where this can happen? Of the 10 million people in LA County, A very small percentage are contributing to the problem in the way that Diane Bedford and April Addison, or Sydney McKinley, whatever you want to call her, very few people are doing that. There are also very few people who are, I mean, granted, much more, but very few who are doing the work to solve this problem. And what it comes down to is there aren't enough in that group. And if you aren't in that group, you're part of the problem. I just, there's only so much that we can do, the people who are volunteering and fostering and adopting and advocating and trying to change laws. But if the everyday average Joe doesn't change what they're doing, it doesn't have to be huge, but in some way, it's part of the problem. You're part of the problem. And so it's just, there are so many dogs and there just aren't enough homes for all those dogs. And so I urge you to look at the number of people who are doing these horrible, despicable things. Look at why that's happening, why we're in a position where that's going to happen. And then we need to figure out what you can do, what I can do, what every single person needs to be doing in order to move away from that. So I want to call attention to some of the things that have brought us here. How have we got here? You've heard from us a million times that spaying and neutering is going to be the solution to this problem. And so if you aren't spaying and neutering your dogs or advocating for spaying and neutering, then you're part of the problem. You're part of how we're getting here. If you need me to explain that, then that's going to be a whole nother situation because I have so much more to say. I think another huge subsect of this problem that has not been talked about enough is landlords and living situations and the cost of everything. I understand that inflation is a much bigger issue to tackle. How many of the 10 million people of LA County are landlords? Okay, what are those people putting in place? Do they have breed restrictions? Do they have no pets allowed? Do they have 1 dog max, 2 dog max? And are fosters included in that maximum? This may seem like a small part of this huge problem, but if you go on any of these Facebook pages where people are rehoming their dogs, I can't tell you how often it's the case that somebody has to rehome their dog even though they don't want to. It's extremely difficult to find a place to live in California, let alone one you can afford that also allows pets, let alone one that allows large pets, which is what the shelters are full of. We are making it impossible to solve this situation because even those who actually want to put in the work to solve this problem aren't in a living situation where they can. Unfortunately, because there are so many more dogs than homes, to decrease euthanasia of healthy dogs, we are going to need a hell of a lot more people looking at their living situation and physical capabilities and asking if they have the capacity to adopt a dog or another dog or foster. Even if it isn't the most ideal, we're going to need thousands more people to sacrifice a little bit of their time and effort to save these dogs' lives. A second point that shares some overlap with the previous point is that we need more people looking at their skills and time and asking what they can do to help, if not foster or adopt. In my circle, it's the same people who are fostering, going to walk the dogs in the shelters, advocating for the dogs, networking the dogs, fundraising, doing social media for these dogs. And the same 20 people only have so many hours between them. So it's going to take a lot more people doing a little bit more to make a dent in this issue. Ask, what is something that I can give in order to contribute to this solution? Are you good at taking pictures, editing pictures, writing, social media? Can you be networking? Can you be making flyers? Can you be putting up flyers? Can you be walking dogs at the shelter for their well-being so that they don't end up with behavioral problems that make it harder to find them a home? Aside from the general attitude towards spaying and neutering being a huge reason why this is happening and needing to educate and shift that perspective so that people understand the importance of it, I think we also need to be talking about the availability of spaying and neutering, because it just so happens that we're also in a vet shortage here in Southern California. And so even when people are willing to spay and neuter, we're having the issue where they can't find it or they can't afford it. And again, this is one of those problems. It's going to be a really big problem to solve, but we need to fix it. We need vets stepping up and donating their services or discounting their services. This is such a huge problem that some people are going to need to sacrifice in order to start fixing it. Even in our rescue organization, getting our dogs spayed and neutered, which is like the top of our priorities, there's this wait list, months-long wait list to get these dogs fixed. And if you're not, in a responsible setting where you're not going to be putting dogs together that aren't spayed and neutered, dogs in homes who think like, oh, I do plan on getting my dog spayed and neutered, but it's so booked out in advance, but they're taking their dogs to dog parks. How many unwanted pregnancies are we having where there's just a whole new litter of puppies that's going to end up in the shelter? And you might think like, oh, it's easy to find puppies' homes. It's not anymore. It's not. We have plenty of puppies. In fact, when Devore had to accommodate for these 120 dogs that they confiscated, tons of puppies were put down. Like, I just can't emphasize that this problem goes so far beyond this one woman who decided to try and adopt hundreds of dogs to try and save their lives and then just didn't. I can't emphasize that this problem is in such a grand scale that we need to be talking about it. Another huge issue is the law system. We need to start tackling breeding and spaying and neutering, the importance of spaying and neutering from a legal standpoint, and I don't know how to do that. We've been writing our legislators to try and say, hey, this problem is so big that we're drowning, and the only way to ever make a dent in it is to put laws in place against breeding and put laws in place that require spay and neuter, at least until this issue is curbed. But if it's just this small subsect of people who are writing letters again and again, nothing's going to be done. We need everybody talking about this and everybody writing their legislators. And hopefully there are going to be people who have better knowledge of how to put these legal restrictions in place, who can guide us and help us, because we do our best and we try and research, but when it's the same people doing these same things, there's only so much we can do. I think that our legislators don't believe that enough of us care about animals. And I think if you asked the average taxpayer, would you be okay with some of your taxes going toward funding these shelters so that we don't have to put down, hundreds of dogs all the time? I think a lot of people would say yes, but not enough people are thinking about it and talking about it, and nobody's asking the question. And so the lawmakers, it's just, when they have so many things to take care of, this little speck of people who are talking about this and writing about this, I mean, that's, the very bottom of their priority list, because either they don't realize how big of a problem it is, or it's just not as important to them and how they view as important to the general public to actually focus on. I think if everybody knew what was going on, this issue would be curbed, at least some, but people don't know, and some people don't want to know, which I completely understand. But unless we start talking about how disgusting this issue is, it's never going to change. And so while I understand it hurts to look at, it's never going to change if we don't look at it and we don't talk about it and we don't start actively making changes in everything, in these little things in our lives to fix this problem. So all this to say, tragedies are happening every day because it's not enough people who are talking about it and caring about it and acting about it. And so I beg you, if there's any way that you can contribute to the solution of this problem, and I guarantee you there is, please do. We need your help. We are absolutely drowning. Dogs are dying, and sometimes it's on a youth list in a shelter, and sometimes it's after being rescued and neglected for years. And if you don't start doing something about it, or more about it, it will continue to happen forever. Please share with your friends. Please talk about this, and let's fix this, because I think it's really shameful that where we live, this is happening. I don't think that the general public wants this to be happening, but unless there are people who are doing something about it, it's going to keep happening.